It's the Task Management and Time Blocking Podcast, episode 16. If you're interested in using online calendars, you may have seen ads for the auto scheduler called Motion. You've probably wondered what it might be like to use it for yourself, but you don't have the time or the bandwidth for a proper test. In this episode with Dr. Melanie Wilson, we share the results of our actual first-hand tests with you. We both have spent years using auto schedulers. We were kind of like early adopters. So we have a few insights you won't hear elsewhere. Tune in to find out what we discovered, and you could save a little bit of time, stress, and even money. Welcome to the Task Management and Time Blocking Podcast. So welcome back. And as you see, I have brought up Dr. Melanie Wilson, and in a moment, I'm going to introduce her. But before I do that, let me just make sure that if you have never visited the Task Management and Time Blocking podcast before, you know what you're in for. So very quickly, we have a two-part or a three-part format, where in the first part, we describe a problem, sort of talk about how awful it is, basically. Then we go into solutions. The better the analysis that we do up front, the better the solutions we find in the second part. And third part, we focus on implementation. And if we discover something brand new that we've never found before or never seen before, then we have a bell. And I'll bring up the bell and I'll ring it, and you'll hear it, and it'll mean that we discovered something that neither of us found before. So this would probably be a shorter episode. You may not hear a bell. And in that case, I won't penalize us with the buzzer, which is the other half of what we do. But we'll see. But let's start with a story. Norman. So Norman currently uses Google Calendar to do his time blocking, but he recently came across the Motion app in an ad on Facebook. It promises to revolutionize his productivity by automatically scheduling his calendar and making smart recommendations. He wants to give it a try, but he's reluctant. He's a busy person and can't afford to make mistakes in his task management setup just to try a new app. Really? If it doesn't work, he would have a big problem, and he doesn't like the idea of changing a wing on his productivity airplane while he's in flight over the ocean. So when he searches for reviews, he can't find anything in depth that could really help. He decides to pause his curiosity about Motion indefinitely. But, is that a long-term solution? No. He can't stay stuck in one place forever using the exact same setup. There ought to be more guidance in making this kind of decision that isn't just a sales pitch or a superficial summary. The kind of guidance that would give him an idea whether or not to try the app or not. So, Dr. Melanie Wilson is a clinical psychologist turned homeschooling mother of 6. She publishes the homeschool curriculum, Grammar Galaxy, and is the author of A Year of Living Productively. Melanie, welcome to the podcast.
Well, thank you so much for having me. I love your intro story. So I'm excited to help him with some guidance on Motion.
Great. But he's not alone, Melanie, is he, Mr. Norman? He is like many people, because a lot of us have seen the ads, right? They're now following me around because being curious, I clicked on a bunch of them, and I'm now, Google or Facebook or LinkedIn or somebody thinks I'm the best possible prospect for Motion. I guess I am. Have you seen the ads as well?
Yes, for sure. It's all the time. And one of the things that I really struggle with, I always have in many areas of my life, is I'll make a decision about something. And then when it keeps getting presented to me, I think, oh, I should take another look at that. So that kind of sets up our conversation about it.
Oh, the algorithms love you.
Right.
Well, I
Yes.
guess they love me too. This is here I am. And some of the ads were, they were provocative, right? They were like
Mhm.
saying, "Are you still stuck in using to-do lists? Are you listening to gurus who are telling you to use to-do lists when you shouldn't?" It was as if they'd heard our podcasts or conversations in the past and said, "Let's go after those guys."
Mhm.
Because guys, in case you haven't, in case you didn't know, and you're listening to this podcast, Melanie and I did a two-part series back in 2018. Am I right?
I think so.
It's boy, long before COVID, but we
Yes.
analyzed six of the auto schedulers that we could find at the time. I think we found six. One was kind of on its way out, but the landscape has changed so much, and we'll talk about that in a separate podcast. But we did the only analysis I've ever seen of auto schedulers. And in case you don't know what an auto scheduler is, you don't know what they do, let me just give you a quick briefing. The auto scheduler puts an invisible hand into your calendar and moves the flexible tasks around. It preserves the appointments.
Mhm.
So, for example, Melanie and I are in an appointment right now that's in our calendars. The auto scheduler would ignore the appointment that you have with someone else, but it would move all the other tasks around in an effort to optimize your calendar with the click of a button. So the technology has been around since at least the late 90s with a few prototypes. And Motion, I think as we speak, is the very latest entry. Is that accurate? Is everything
I think so. I haven't seen anything else.
okay? So Motion is and they're not only the most accurate, but they're the by far the most aggressive in terms of advertisements.
I agree with that.
Nobody else is saying the things that they're saying, and they're persistent. So they're spending. There's a spend happening here. They're looking for a return on their investment. No other auto scheduler has promoted this extensively on multiple platforms. So there's a provocative nature of the ads, and there's the volume of the number of ads. So Motion has popped up on lots of people's radar, and it has them asking, well, what is an auto scheduler? What are they talking about? Can it really do these things? And the answer is yes, right?
Yeah, it can. It's not going to do it perfectly, but yes, it can do what it promises to do.
Right. So it's not false advertising or anything like that. It really is doing what it promises it can do.
Mhm.
But let's talk about the challenge of, if you've seen the ads or not, you're hearing us talk about Motion, and you're asking, isn't there an easy way to kind of test this thing out? And let's say that that's kind of the villain of this whole episode, because there'll always be an app that presents itself to you, and you will have to make a decision as to whether or not to test it or not.
Mhm.
And there's some challenges that come with that. So the challenge that you have maybe is that you want to try Motion, but you don't want it to disrupt your workflow. Is that accurate, Melanie?
Yes, for sure. Why go backward with your time management in order to maybe gain just a little bit of benefit in your process? So I think that's one of the key issues here.
Because we have real lives, right? It's not like we're testing this thing for the. I mean, it's fun, right? But we're not testing it for the fun of it. We're looking to gain an actual improvement. But to gain the improvement, you have to actually use it in real life. And I did it. I took the 5 day, what do they call it, the trial? You took the 5 day trial as well?
Yes,
And
yes.
I did as much as I could in
Mhm,
terms of learning how to do it in the 5 day, but
mhm.
it's not the same. Definitely not the same as having it run your life for
No.
no, right?
No.
And one of the things that you've done, just so that folks know, since doing our review 6, 4, 2, 3, 5 years ago, 4 years ago, it's COVID time, it's hard to keep track.
Yeah.
Is that you're no longer using an auto scheduler? So what are you using? Wait, let's tell the
I'm
truth.
I'm not. I am using Amazing Marvin, and I would say it actually makes so much sense that I'm using Amazing Marvin because that particular task management platform allows you to keep all of your tasks in one place, but then change your strategy whenever you feel like it. And as you know, for a year of living productively, I tested so many different strategies. And as you were saying at the beginning, it is really challenging to take all of your tasks and move them from platform to platform and get them set up to be usable. And so with Amazing Marvin, I don't have to do that. And we can talk about, what I'm actually doing in Amazing Marvin, which is a little bit funny to me because it's not really anything very fancy. But I noted that it would be nice for me to try an auto scheduling approach within Amazing Marvin, and other people have asked about that in their community, and they don't yet have it available.
As an
Right.
option. The way
An
Motion
option.
does. So, to Motion's
Mhm.
credit, they've found the latest technology and they've implemented it and they're offering it to us. And the two of us tested it, and I tested it as someone who uses SkedPal.
Mhm.
And so Melanie is the one who introduced me to SkedPal. So she got me to use it.
Mhm.
Very thankfully, I'm really grateful to her. She introduced me to the world of auto scheduling, and she has regressed. She's
Okay, now.
backslidden since then, and she's given up the given up the gospel. She's
Oh boy.
I'm joking, but
Yes.
but but the switching, she's closer to it than I am. The switching is difficult, and when an app like Motion or any app that promises over and over again in a provocative manner that you should use it because it will change your life, you need to consider it
Mhm.
because it could be truthful.
Mhm.
So Motion, you could be a little bit frustrated because you don't really know, do I test this thing out? Do I go the full Monty? Do I do like Melanie did? Do I move all my tasks from one app to another just to test to see if it works in real time, only to find out after a series of mishaps that I made a mistake? There really should be a better way to do these tests. I don't know that there is. 5 days for me wasn't actually enough. Not enough happened in the 5 days. I
Mhm.
didn't put my real tasks in motion. I put a couple of fake ones just to
Mm,
see what it would do.
okay.
So I don't really know what would happen if I turn it on for real. And 5 days enough for you? For me, it was like,
Um, I would say yes, but that's because I have very specific parameters of what I want
okay.
in a task manager. And spoiler alert, it didn't have those for me. And so it was easy. It was easy for me to figure that out in a shorter period of time.
Right, right. So this is an
Mhm.
expert talking, as opposed to, if you're really just trying it for the first time, you're it could be very different for you. And as you're going through these tests, you also don't want to be the one stuck in an app that is so 1995 when everyone is out in 2023, for example, using things that are mentioned in the motion ads, like machine learning, for example. And it's using AI.
Mhm.
You don't want to be the one who is kind of stuck in the hinterlands of productivity apps when better one exists. So most people, I think, when they come across this problem, is that they kind of ignore it, and that actually is that healthy. It stops them from really growing, because we wouldn't be where we are right now if we hadn't bitten the bullet and done some kind of switching, testing, and then switching. True. So we want other people to have the benefit of doing that. It's just it, there are ways to do it, and there are probably ways not to do it. But the the thing that makes this different from using, for example, a social media app is, once again, the fact that this is your life.
Mm.
If you're time blocking, your life is in a calendar. This is not fun. Like, let's go try Netflix. This is not, ooh, TikTok. No, this is a core of doing everything that matters. This is your job. This is how you earn your money. This is how you pay your bills. This is how you take care of your health. This is how you spend time with your family. These are the meetings that you need to attend to at work. The most important things in your world are being time blocked into your calendar. And when an app comes along and starts to get your interest, you got to take it seriously as to whether or not you're going to try it or not. Is that accurate in your experience, Melanie?
Definitely. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's not just you know, a recreational
Oh,
journey. Uh, you're messing around with, if you do a real test, and I used real tasks in my test of motion, then it can be serious. You don't want to drop the ball. You don't want to miss things that are really, really important for you to do.
right, right. So we'll talk about, ultimately we're looking for a way to test an auto scheduler, because let's keep it narrow and see if an auto scheduler, what's the best way to try one out, because there'll be a motion 2.0 and there'll be another thing 1.0 that comes along. There's going to be an endless stream, because as far as we've seen, there maybe is a new app every year or two, every 6 months or so, I think, based on what I'm seeing. They seem to come out every 6 months, a new auto scheduling app. And if you're someone who is into this kind of level of productivity, it's worth paying attention to.
Mhm.
All right, so hopefully we can give you some insights that would allow you to approach the question of using a new auto scheduler in the future with some more felicity and less pain and less fear. Okay, so let's talk about motion. So I'm guided by the analysis that we did of auto schedulers, which we'll put in the show notes so that you can see what we did back in 2018, December 15th, according to my URL here I'm looking at. And we looked at a number of facets. But maybe we'll start with an overall assessment. For me, motion felt like the early versions of SkedPal. Like it's cool, it works, and to get it to work, you've got to do a lot of things that the developers, there are problems that an auto scheduler user has that the developers haven't quite discovered or fixed yet as a result. So it
Mhm.
felt like an early version of auto schedulers. Like when you're doing it when you're creating one for the first time, you tend to, wow, look, it's moving the tasks around. So it focuses on that and
Mm.
other kinds of features that aren't really core to the auto scheduling experience,
Mhm.
like scheduling time with someone else. So that's a part of motion.
Mm.
Um,
Mhm.
my thought was that's nothing to do with auto scheduling, really.
Mhm.
That could be done somewhere
Mhm.
else right now. And I'd prefer if the app just focused on the auto scheduling part, because that part is actually hard enough. And that part's could be developed a whole lot more rather than putting in other things, which kind of, they could be interesting, they could be useful, but they're not essential to the auto scheduling. I wanted motion just to be an auto scheduler, and a really good auto scheduler, not a beginner auto scheduler. But I could be being harsh, Melanie. What was your
No,
overall assessment?
I absolutely agree with that. And I think the only thing that I saw that I liked, that was something that SkedPal introduced a little further into their development, was once motion reschedules your tasks, it will ask you if everything looks fine or not. And I thought that was a very nice touch, that in other words, it's saying, hey, we're not a dictator here. You're a partner. We're working with you. And so I liked that. But otherwise, I would agree with you. Um, Even right from the beginning, there are no time maps, which we talked about with
Right.
respect to SkedPal.
Just
And
explain what a time map
yes,
is
I
very
will.
briefly. Go ahead.
So in other words, I can tell SkedPal that I want to be doing, let's say, writing projects from 8 in the morning until 10 in the morning, Monday through Friday, and then no more. I don't want to do writing projects in the afternoon. And instead, I want to be doing administrative work that's not as, uh,
Right.
process heavy.
Right.
And that is so, so important because without that, if I tell Motion, these are all the writing projects that I have coming up, and they're all high priority. And maybe there's like a moderate deadline, and we can talk about how it does that as well. But it could absolutely have me writing 8 hours a day because
Right.
it doesn't know that there are certain kinds of tasks that I want to be time boxed, to have limits around, and SkedPal allows you to indicate that.
Right. So SkedPal had that as an innovation earlier on, and it's gotten better.
Hmm.
The idea, the classification of a task to a, because it's a two-stepper. You define the time map, and then you assign a task to that time map because it belongs to a category of task. So Motion allows you to do that per task, but there's no time map behind it that's trying to optimize the shape of your schedule. Um, and I missed that as well, and I couldn't see myself. And it's something I think happens with young or new auto schedulers, is that they don't try to optimize your schedule per se as an entirety. They're trying to optimize tasks. They're thinking more about putting the right task in the right place rather than giving you the entire schedule that you want. That seems to come a little bit later for the ones that we
Hmm.
studied the last time. It seems
Hmm.
to be an objective that evolves over time, but it's not there initially. So they
Right.
don't typically put that capability in there. They're basically telling you, look, tasks organize themselves. It's not amazing, which it is, and it takes you part of the way, but not the entire way. And I think, tell me what you think of this. I think the challenge is that they're trying to, how can I say this? The first problem they face is, how do I schedule in a way that allows the schedule to at least be feasible?
Hmm.
So they tend to work with, and they tend to show you examples of really small.
Well, right. And I mean, if you have 10 tasks, then you can schedule those yourself. I mean, it's easy. It would be easy to do. The people who need an auto scheduler, they have a lot of competing um, priority projects and tasks. They don't want to let the little things fall through the cracks, and they just want someone who knows them like an assistant would, and could say, you should get started on X project because it's due at the end of the week. And I know you have other appointments coming up. So I think you should start this morning. And notice how I said, I think you should, not you're going to do it.
Right.
We don't want that kind of, authoritarianism in our task scheduler any more than we
Right.
want it in our real relationships. So,
Right.
um, I do think Motion is doing a good job with that part. It's
Right.
just, um, these, and I mean, no doubt, it's a daunting task to try to figure out a good schedule for someone who is overcommitted. I mean, let's
Right.
be honest. Um,
Yes.
yeah.
More tasks than you can complete in 168 hours,
Hmm.
the number of hours in a week. Yeah. And you're right. That's the tool. This tool is for those people. So in a way, not optimizing it, but solving the problem of auto scheduling 10 tasks, 20 tasks, 30 tasks. It's a whole different world than managing 200.
Mhm.
And one of the things I noticed in Motion is that they don't really give you a way to manage a list of 200.
Right.
And in fact, SkedPal didn't do that. This is why I made the quip about this being like SkedPal Junior or
Mhm.
SkedPal
Mhm.
in the past. Yeah, SkedPal didn't have it either. You had
Mhm.
to schedule everything into the calendar with the way Motion is. But SkedPal evolved into a blend of a task manager, which is a database or list, and the calendar. And now you move tasks in between the two at will. It gives you a place to park tasks indefinitely if you want, and not necessarily schedule all of them.
Mhm.
And Motion doesn't have that. And I think it's on the same learning curve that SkedPal is, because
Uh-huh.
SkedPal wasn't there in the beginning. They
Mhm.
discovered that, hold on, scheduling everything doesn't make sense. So, and by the way, I just so that everyone knows, I'm mentioning SkedPal because that's the auto schedule I've always used. But I also have a tiny share in SkedPal. So in case you're thinking, this guy, yeah, I do have, and it's on my website. I just wanted to declare that every time I say SkedPal, you should be like, huh. Melanie has no shares, however. but
But
anyway,
I'm
SkedPal had to improve itself.
yes, but I am a huge fan. If you know, just honestly, I frequently consider going back to an auto scheduler, and SkedPal is the one that I would choose still after
Okay.
testing Motion. So
So we'll
I'm
we'll
a
talk
fan.
about that in the podcast that we do to update
Right.
the
Right.
your
Yes.
waning fandom.
Yes. Yes. Well, yes.
You don't know. But so motions, it felt like it's at the beginning of a learning curve.
Mhm. Mhm.
And so the promises that you read in the ads sounded to me a bit bombastic. What you had? Is that a nice
Yes.
unkind
For
word? It was
sure.
like
For
they
sure.
were like in your
25%.
face. 25%
Yeah.
improve of your tasks won't
No.
get throwing statistics around that. For those
Mhm.
of us who are using auto schedulers, I think it's a tiny market. We tend
Mhm.
to have tried everything else. We know a thing or two because we've been around the block. And when we hear these ads, and we know we've read these numbers for years. So the numbers aren't new
Mhm.
and the claims aren't new. We kind of filter them and say, yeah, well, I've heard that for 10 years. Or I've heard that for 5 years. And this is I don't know if this is a criticism of the way motion has rolled itself out, but it seemed to have bypassed or leapfrogged in its thinking, or just dismissed or didn't think about the precise nature of the people who use auto schedulers, the auto schedulers that were already in the market, to see, okay, why are they using these features and not others?
Mhm.
Why did they abandon this approach and not that one? What happened to the companies that were auto scheduling in 2018 that no longer exist, or they no longer have an app?
Mhm.
What are they grappling with? What are the people grappling with? What are the app developers grappling with? Motion has a feel like they just came out of left field and didn't do that kind of analysis. And when I read the language in the ads, it's not really pitched to people who are senior productivity enthusiasts.
Right.
It's pitched to the general person in the general audience,
Right.
generic person, a novice. And
Mhm.
that novice is going to be like the novices of all the programs that ever pitched. But I think there's something to learn from those who have been using these for a while. What do you? I don't know. Should have given
Absolutely.
us. Should have called us before they launched and said, "Hey, what do you think, Melanie? Am I being like? It's just like an ego thing, you know?"
No, that's absolutely right. You know, there is really the onboarding for someone who has never used an auto scheduler is pretty sparse, and
Right.
they have no idea that a very, very unrealistic schedule is going to be presented to them.
Right.
I mean, I'm just thinking about, if I gave a schedule like this to my homeschooled kids, if I said, okay, first I want you to do an hour of math because you're behind, you got to do an hour of math. And then I want you to do 2 hours of science experiments. And then, and so on and so on. My kids would just say, forget it. I'm not, I'm not going to do my day like that. And it can be that can be your experience if you aren't used to an auto scheduler and how to make it work for your life.
Right, right. The kind of gentle, nuanced onboarding that everybody goes through when they pick up an auto scheduler, because it's this animal that behaves in a way that you need to train it
Mhm.
to
Mhm.
do what it does for you. And I think we can now safely say, having analyzed a few of them and used them. When did you introduce me to SkedPal? Do you remember?
Gosh.
I think it was with my second book. I had to rewrite my second book based on our conversation. So that was
Oh,
2015.
okay. That sounds right.
You made me have to go rewrite my book
Yeah,
because
right. Well,
2015.
if we're talking about the influence on each other, I mean, I may have introduced you to SkedPal, but you wrote a post for my blog at
I
the
remember.
time
Oh, yeah.
about using a calendar. And you talked about why, I think the title was something like why busy CEOs and college students, what they
Oh,
have in
yeah.
common or something
Oh,
like that
yeah.
in terms of their time management. And that article really had me taking a close look at scheduling because I was very resistant to scheduling. I think as many homeschoolers are, we have this idea that, hey, we're homeschoolers, we can do what we want when we want to do it. We don't need a schedule. But as I've gotten busier and busier, and
Right.
every time I've run into a task management quandary in my life, especially my professional life, and I turn to a guru, someone who has really been successful and is very, very good at managing their time. They always use a schedule. They always use a
Or
schedule. And
time blocking using something.
yep, yep. And it has convinced me that that is the only way that I'm going to meet my goals and get the important tasks done. So that is my belief. So the influence goes both ways. It's just whether or not you're using an auto scheduler to make that schedule work for you, or whether you're doing it manually, which is more what I'm doing.
Right, right. But I think the general idea or the principle that we've come across is that as you add lots of tasks, you are going to be pushed into time blocking, and you may be pushed into auto scheduling as well,
Right.
because you need different tools than people have if they're just managing a task manager or a list.
Yes.
The lack of discretionary time eventually becomes an issue, and you have to deal with the sequencing
Hmm.
of activities.
Hmm.
Um,
Hmm.
one of the things we noted in our analysis a few years ago was the presence in some auto schedulers of a reschedule button. Now, Motion offers you the chance to reschedule,
Hmm.
but I didn't. It's because I'm coming from SkedPal, but in SkedPal, I like to follow the sequence of loading up my tasks and then hitting the reschedule button when I'm ready, to not have the power taken away from me. So it felt as if, in Motion, I added the task and then it just gone, it's gone, it's doing its thing. It might ask, do
Right.
you want to change it? But my thought was, well, why not just ask me before you even do the auto scheduling?
Hmm.
Because this is a delicate business. And if you have 10 tasks, not so delicate.
Hmm.
But if you have 100 tasks or 200, you're asking it to do some pretty heavy lifting for you.
Right.
And because of that, I want to have some control over when you give me that new schedule, not before. Because now you're now the app is now optimizing a schedule that doesn't have the other 30 tasks I need to add in. I'm not ready for that yet. I'm still, so
Hmm.
it's,
Very
I
good
felt
point.
it kind of like out of sequence.
Hmm. Hmm.
Like if I have and back to your example of, yeah, you're trying to, in a way, copy the perfect admin assistant, right?
Hmm.
So if I told my admin assistant, okay, I need to have lunch with Bob, I need to work on the paper that's due tomorrow, I need to do some research, and then she cut you off and said, okay, well, you should do this and do that, do that. I said, well, no, I'm not finished yet. Hold on. I also have to. So she's cutting you off and telling you what you need to do before you've told her everything. It's like, it's weird, right?
That, yeah.
But this business of if you're not if the app isn't mimicking something happening in real life, like a real admin assistant,
Mm-hmm.
like the example I always give is of Jeb Bartlett from The West Wing and Mrs. Landingham, his secretary, and she was the perfect secretary, and she would tell him what to do, when to do it, and she would organize his schedule. He didn't have to
Mm-hmm.
think about. She was his auto scheduler.
Right.
That we're trying to mimic
Mm-hmm.
a real life relationship with a human being, probably.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but it seems as if the app, and this is a criticism of all of the auto schedulers for me, the graphical user interface is not really built to mimic a real life relationship. It's more like I'm interacting with an app, like I'm working with Google Calendar, than it is I'm working with Mrs. Landingham. What do you think of that analogy
Yes.
or the
Yes.
notion?
That's absolutely the case. So, a person would know, well, I can't put these two really, heavy mental resource tasks back to back for her with no break. Um, but we would have to say, hey, this is going to be really, concentrated creative work. I'm going to need a break after this task, after an hour and a half. And, I don't even think that there is a way in any auto scheduler
Mhm.
to kind of code that in and to say, hey, maybe task by task at times, like I'm going to need a break after this
Right.
one.
You,
Um,
you can
or,
program in buffer times, but
yeah,
that's for all
or
tasks.
or how about a reward, because this is going
Mhm.
to be, when I get my taxes done,
You
yeah,
need a
I
reward.
I want to celebrate. I don't want to do something else, turn right around and do something else. And so, we have discussed before how, I mean, with SkedPal too, this was an issue that SkedPal can give you buffer time between
Mhm.
tasks, which is lovely. But if you are going to be driving to an appointment, for example, you face a challenge of, well, do I make my appointment on my calendar, not the task manager? Do I make the appointment such that the appointment is actually when I'm supposed to leave to get there? And
Right.
then if I do that, if you have my ADD brain, you go, now when is the appointment though?
Right.
Is it at 3 o'clock, or did I put it in that I'm driving at 3 o'clock to get there? And I
Right.
couldn't ever remember. I mean, I'm sure I could have created a rule that, I'm always going to make it for the drive time, or vice versa. But so there's that. Or if I don't do that, then I have to create a separate task for each appointment, driving to the appointment, returning from the appointment. It's such a pain. And if I had an assistant, I would just say, hey, it's going to take me 15 minutes to get there. So just make sure you don't you don't schedule me for anything.
Right.
I don't know. That's
Well,
that's
it's one
one
of
of the
these
issues.
kind of nuanced behaviors that motion is trying to capture these behaviors in software, which is like any auto scheduler is a really difficult task to do.
Mhm.
And it started along, and it's gotten some of the behaviors, like the part where you move the tasks around in your calendar.
Mhm.
It's gotten that part.
Mhm.
But to make it work, what I hear you saying is that there are other subtleties that can totally throw that off
Mhm.
if they're not taken into account.
Right.
And I imagine that's where the motion people are going, and all auto schedulers are going. They're just not
Right.
there, not there yet. So
Right.
we don't
Because
want to discourage the motion guys, right?
no, I don't want to discourage them. But here's the problem. We know, if you've done any experimenting or reading in productivity like we have, that if you don't trust a system, that's the kiss of death. You're going to stop using it. And so if Motion or any other auto scheduler starts planning tasks right up to my appointment times and not giving me that buffer, then I'm just going to ignore it. I'm just going to say, yeah. So motion doesn't even know what it's talking about. And,
Right.
I'll just do it. And so then if I'm just going to do it and if I'm just going to figure it out, then why am I using motion at all?
Right. Right. If you're left having to figure out too much, right, you just bypass it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. All right. Anything else we want to cover about motion, Doc?
So, well, can I give some suggestions for improvement?
Ooh. So the guys at motion are no like bristling, right?
No.
Okay, go ahead.
Okay. So number one, it's a black background on their iPhone app. I have an iPhone, obviously, and on their desktop app. I don't like it. I find it's hard on me, like just with my eyesight. It's not very clear. I would change that immediately, or at least give an option
Give the
for a
option.
different background.
Mhm.
There is no, and SkedPal did not have this either, like a really fast integration between Gmail and task entry. What I like to do is go through my email, and everything that is task associated, I like to just click a button and add it to my task manager. And there's nothing like that.
I believe
So,
there's an app called AkiFlow that I tried that has that.
okay.
It makes their specialty is making it seamless to do that.
Okay.
But different app altogether doesn't help us in this case. Yeah.
Amazing Marvin has a Chrome extension that I use for that purpose.
Oh, it does, and it does that.
Yes.
Okay, yeah, there we go.
So I have the email open. I just click the little check mark, Amazing Martin button. It gives me the chance to change the task title if I want, or I can just do all of that in my inbox. So that would be one for me.
Great.
Or
two. The black background and the color and the Gmail integration.
And then something that is really a problem for me is that it automatically adds all of the tasks to my main Gmail calendar. They're right there. They are either listed, depending on your setting, they're either listed as a motion task, period, just generic, or it will give the exact title. And there is no way to disconnect that. There's no way of undoing that.
I saw them show up. I didn't try to get rid of them though. I didn't go the next step. You can't.
Cannot. No. So other task managers that I've seen, they make a separate calendar for you in your account that you can then hide. So you don't have to see all those tasks and that kind of thing. But motion is treating each of my tasks. And, there's I guess a case to be made for that. It's like, hey, treat these like an appointment, but they're not. And so now I have, and I have some short tasks. And so I have this big black, list, this big black blob of tasks on my main calendar. And that is a no-go for me. One thing, I'm just going to insert it because we kind of got onto the constructive criticism. But one thing that I do like, if I had the calendar set up, if the schedule was set up the way that I wanted, I do kind of like that they have this little pop-up. It's a focus banner, I think they call it. And it makes a little pop sound that pops up on your desktop, and it says what you're working on. I thought that was a nice touch. I haven't been able to figure out how to turn it off.
It's a notification that says I'm working on this. Okay.
Yeah, but that would be kind of nice. It would be like having your assistant pop in and say, hey, your next appointment is coming in 30 minutes. You should review your notes for that or whatever.
Okay.
So that is a plus and a minus.
Right. Does motion have to be running in the background for that does the tab have to be running motion for
no.
it to? Okay,
This
so
is
you're trying to get rid of it.
also a little alarming. Like, how do I turn this off now?
All
I
right. So
don't know.
you need someone from
Um,
Motion to send you an email and say my trial is up, but I'm getting pop-ups anyway. And will this be auto scheduling forever?
I know. So those are some things, besides what we've also talked about in a more generic sense that I would really encourage them to work on. And I completely agree with you that I would not have this whole scheduling piece. And by scheduling, sorry, it gets confusing. And even in the app, it gets a little bit confusing because it will say schedule or scheduling. And you're wondering, well, okay, is that like I'm scheduling my tasks? And no, that means meetings, where you give an appointment calendar, that kind of thing. I would take that piece out completely.
Right. And not have another app do that
Yep.
because it's tough to try to be great at both.
Mm-hmm.
And if you're going to be an auto schedule, be an auto schedule. If you're going to be a calendar app for managing meetings like Calendly, or I use once Hub, I think I use, then do that. But
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
doing both in the same space they're both big problems, big challenges, and to try to solve them together.
Right.
Our advice is, be a fish or a fall, but not a fish fall.
Okay.
Awful analogy.
Yeah.
The other feature I wanted to see was task dependency, which you do need to have real project scheduling,
Mm-hmm.
and then to prioritize between projects, program management, basically. But like I said, my relationship to Motion, my conclusion is that it's an early auto scheduler based on the ones that we've looked at, and that will eventually. That's not something you see in an early version. Something you see
Mm-hmm.
later on.
Mm-hmm.
So I think our net is, guys at Motion, if you're listening, keep innovating. And if you're not using Motion and you're thinking about using it, we believe it has promise. I don't know that I saw any feature that's worth adopting it for, given the market of auto schedulers and the maturity of other apps. So to my mind, it doesn't displace any of the others. It's an early version of a few of the others, and it's one to watch.
Mm-hmm.
But
Right.
I think it has a way to go. Is that a fair assessment?
Yes, and it doesn't have a beta price point either.
It came in. It came in with a full product.
Right.
It's probably the most expensive auto scheduler out there.
Right. So
Again, as if the others don't really exist. As if we
yeah.
didn't bother to check what the market is doing. We're just pricing at a premium point, which is, this is not a marketing show, but as a user, it's like, oh no, and 5 days to decide whether or not you pay the full price is like,
right. That's yes. Kind of bringing it back to the beginning, you said, was 5 days enough time? For me, it was, but for someone who isn't familiar with auto schedulers, absolutely not. That is not enough time at all.
Right. It's tough to make a big decision like that based on. Okay, so Melanie, we're going to have you back for another chat about auto schedulers in particular, and to revise our list of the best and the worst and what we think of the market on a whole, revising our 2018 analysis. But where can folks get a hold of you when they want to talk to Dr. Mel?
Well, I have a website where I sell my book, A Year of Living Productively. It's on my homeschool books website, and that's called funtolearnbooks.com. And you can find my book there. Of course, it's on Amazon, but you can also, I still have the Psycho with 6. That's the numeral, Psycho with 6 @gmail account. That's my blog where I originally did all of my productivity experiments and posts. And just so you know, if you haven't figured it out, I'm a psychologist with 6 kids. And so that's why That was my blog name. I'm going to be retiring that and making it a part of homeschoolsanity.com. But psychowith6@gmail.com, you can reach me there to ask about any productivity questions.
Great, great. So, folks, reach out to Melanie and keep listening. There's some information I want to share with you about our next podcast coming up in just a moment, and some other information you may find useful. Keep listening. Do you think you can avoid using context for your tasks? Think again. You've tried using context for your tasks in the past, perhaps following the advice of getting things done, GTD. The idea was a sound one, and it made a positive contribution. But as time went on, the technique seemed to lose its potency. Question is, why? And did this experience imply that you needed to stop using them altogether? This may not make sense because when you applied context to a raw list of tasks in a to-do list, it did make things better. You tried it in the past and it worked. So is the idea a bad one? In this solo episode, we take a deep dive into the research behind context done by us here at Two Time Labs and Schedule U. I'll share some of my latest thinking, which shows why contexts are unavoidable and why you need to move way past the ones suggested by Getting Things Done as published in 2001. And if you want to leave a comment about this episode or any aspect of the work that we're doing here at the Task Management and Time Blocking Podcast, you can go over to www.replytofrancis.info and send me either a message by text or send me a voice message, a voice note. And as you probably know, we have a couple of places that you can interact with other people, talk about this episode. One is at the community, mightytaskers.scheduleu.org, and you'll see the link in the show notes. And the other, of course, is our upcoming Task Management and Time Blocking Summit coming up in March. Two outstanding opportunities to interact with other people about the ideas that you've heard on this podcast or any of our episodes that are coming up. And if you'd like to support the work we're doing, I invite you to click on the Patreon link below to make a donation. And please don't forget to like our show and recommend it to others on iTunes, Stitcher, Google, or whatever podcast app or service you're using. This is Francis Wade. I'm signing out. I hope to see you on a future episode. And until then, take care and all the best. See you later.